Hello there, what's happening? Tim Warner here. You know, I just finished recording a YouTube lesson on determining the shape of your presentation, and in there I had the idea of brainstorming, so I'm just going to continue. I know you're watching this video on a different day, but it's a continuation of my lesson on find the shape of your presentation, and this one is on the brainstorming process. The idea is that you're tasked, you've been asked to give a talk, or maybe you've pitched to do a session for a technology user group, or maybe you're a trainer like I am and you're looking to commission a new course, whatever. You're on the front end of the project and you don't yet know what your key message is. You don't yet know exactly who your audience is, so you can't determine the shape of the presentation until you have at least that much. So the first phase, the most fluid phase of an instructional design project, is the brainstorming process. And the way I start the brainstorming process, well, it depends on whether it's just completely originated from me where I'm pitching an idea, or if I've been asked to do a presentation. I'm asked pretty regularly, fortunately, to give presentations. So what I'll do is I'll get on a call, like a Zoom call or Teams call with my clients and interview them. I want to hear everything they have to say. Because they're asking me to present to them, they obviously have some idea of what they want. Now, unfortunately, human nature is what it is. A lot of times it's fuzzy, particularly if it's a salesperson who's asking me to do a presentation for one of their clients. Chances are the salesperson's not technically proficient, so maybe they just heard, well, the client wants a session on DevOps. And I say, well, you know, that's kind of like, imagine if you were asked to give a presentation on sales. Would that be very helpful? No, probably not. So I want to know as granularly as possible what the actual need is, or to use the buzzword, what the ask is. And in so doing, I want to know as much as possible about the audience. Why? I don't want to waste anybody's time. I don't want to waste their time, and I don't want to waste my time either. If it's going to be a bunch of developers, and I give a talk that doesn't deal with development, who's learning what? You know what I mean? So having that initial intel is so important and so valuable and so necessary when I'm creating a presentation or a lesson for a client. Similarly, like I mentioned in my Find the Shape of Your Presentation video, I also want to know what the constraints, the logistical constraints are, particularly time limits. I need to know my time marker, because as I talked about in the multi-channel public speaking video, as you can see, I'm practicing what I preach. Even though these little YouTube videos are unscripted and largely spontaneous, I still try to think of a through line through all of them. And they are very self-referential and cross-referential for sure. And in my lesson on multi-channel public speaking, I've got my meta track going in my head. And that's entirely or almost entirely time dependent. I want to know how much time the client needs or what their hard stop time is. I want to make sure to never go over out of respect for the client, you see. So, all right, so let's say I have an idea of some degree of clarity or to some degree of clarity on the subject, what the request is, what the audience is, and my time limit. Now it's time for me to do some brainstorming. And again, I'll get a lot of information from the client. Now, if I'm generating a proposal from my own brain, and I'm actually working on a couple course proposals right now that are completely self-originated, there I have more freedom because the idea is coming from me. But I'll still sometimes turn to interviewing. It could be a friend or a colleague, somebody who knows more about the subject matter than I do, and try to get a finger on the pulse of what are the most important elements of whatever the subject is. Where do I capture all of this brainstorming information? Well, some kind of tool. It doesn't matter which one you have as long as it works for you. I myself use Notion. If you've ever heard of Notion, their domain name is notion.so, notion.so. I've used Evernote for a number of years, but it's just too bloated, too slow, and I gave up on it. Notion suits my needs well. So when I'm having one of these client meetings, I'll just whip up a new Notion page and start dumping my notes on there. That's a fine starting point. And from there, I might go directly to PowerPoint, actually, or I might use a mind mapping software. Mind mapping is a technique where you create, it's not exactly a flowchart because it's not exactly linear, but it's a graphical way for you to capture your ideas and identify relationships between topics and subtopics and sub-subtopics in a way that makes sense to you. I use a mind mapping tool called Minddomo, Mindomo. And no, I'm not getting any affiliate or credit from any of these SaaS companies. I'm mentioning them simply in case you're interested. And Minddomo is cool because I can start work on my computer and pick it up on my iPad. They've got mobile apps, browser, all this sort of stuff, desktop apps. They're pretty ubiquitous, and I like them for that reason. Either way, whether I've got a bunch of notes in Notion and or a mind map, ultimately I'm going to be relying on PowerPoint. That's my lingua franca of doing presentations. So I'll pop open a Prezzo, and if I'll choose my template. It may be if it's work, I'm going to use a Pluralsight template. If it's for a tech user group, I use a modified Pluralsight template. If it's just a self-created lesson, I have my own template designs that I've made. And then I'll just start blocking out the presentation. I'm still brainstorming even though I'm in PowerPoint. I'll literally just throw together a title, and maybe the title's not even final yet. I'll just put what I have, and I'll chunk the presentation out with some topic slide names. And again, the names may evolve over time. I'll have an agenda slide that will capture those heading names and just start chunking around. I'll think to myself if I can reuse any of my own content, as long as it's not intellectual property that I've willed over to a client, I can use it, especially my own line art. I use Lucidchart and Visio for my line art. And I may think, well, this lesson, I've already got a bunch of topology diagrams from past work. Why don't I borrow those? And that can be a great time saver. Sometimes on a slide during brainstorming, I will just put a bunch of, brain dump contents. And I'm not talking about IT certification practice exam brain dumps. I'm talking about literally dumping the content of my brain into the slide content, just as a reminder. This would be good. Put a graphic on the right and call outs on the left. Put some PowerShell code here. Something to prompt me. Because again, my brain is still at its most fluid state. And I'm just trying to chunk out the initial bones or the initial skeleton of the presentation. And it will definitely evolve over the subsequent hours or days, however long the time frame of the project is. And then as that skeleton continues to evolve, then I start actually fleshing out. I'm continuing this metaphor, as you can see, putting some muscles on the bones, some connective tissue. The through line and the storyline would be similar to ligaments and tendons. Themes might be like the circulatory system, blood flowing through the system. I guess I could really go to town with this body systems analogy to developing a presentation. A lot of times, I can think this happened to me quite a bit recently. I'll be well into a project. Actually, what I think is fully past brainstorming and actually populating the content of the slides when I realize, hang on, I totally forgot about this. And before I forget, I better make sure to capture it. Sometimes that, I totally forgot about this might be at night when I'm hanging out with my daughter or out with friends. And there I've got my trusted system. I use Getting Things Done, GTD, where I'll send myself an email to have it come. I use Boomerang with Gmail. I'll send myself an email and have it hit my inbox at 7 a.m. the next morning when I'm at my desk. So just at the right time, I get the email that reminds me, hey, add this to the presentation. Those kind of tips and tricks are super helpful. Again, so much of my productivity comes down to getting things done. And there, the idea at Kernel is the brain is a very porous, for me, it can be like a sieve where I have an idea that might be trash, another idea that might be golden. But the trash and the gold are equally likely to flow right out of my brain in the next 10 seconds. So the habit, the muscle, the cognitive muscle memory in GTD is to capture everything, whether you think it's junk or gold. You don't filter on the front end. You capture. And that way later when I'm reviewing my inbox, aha, I would have totally forgot about that. And that's a golden idea. And then, okay, this is junk. Boop, delete, and it's gone, and it's out of my brain. And nothing falls through the cracks at the end of the proverbial day. Well, there's the 10-minute mark. You know, my OCD is saying, Tim, wrap it up. So I'm going to wrap it up. I hope that you got some valuable insights on this lesson on brainstorming and mind mapping. Thank you. I'll see you next time.